Okay, so I watched this debate, Dr. Graham Oppy versus Edward Feser. It was on Capturing Christianity's channel about a day or two ago on Arguments for God. Now, I got to be quite honest with you. I watched the debate. It's a little ponderous for me. A little bit long-winded, a little gaseous, honestly. I mean, literally, they spent about the first hour, it was literally the first hour and 15 minutes defining the parameters of the argument they are about to take place in, defining the parameters of how to successfully successful argumentation, to about, 1 hour and 30 minutes in where they start dealing with the first, I think it's the first one in Edward Feser's book, the Aristotelian proof. I'm pretty sure that's the one that is the first one. Now, Edward Feser, if you do not know, has a book, The 5 Proofs of God. I strongly recommend you check out the book, but here's the caveat of the book. Of those 5 proofs of God, there's only one in there that is actually really important. There's one in there that is called the argument from eternal truth. Now, it doesn't quite prove God. If you're an atheist listening to me, I said it doesn't quite prove God. Nothing to debunk here. Nothing to debunk here, atheists. If you go, quick, Craig's got something up, debunk what he's saying. Nothing to debunk here. It does not quite get you over the finish line, but it is definitely worth thinking about and definitely worth reading. Why? Because it gets you 70% of the way there. To summarize that particular argument in a nutshell, there are such things in life as eternal truths. Mathematical truths, for example, 2 plus 2 equals 4. Laws of logic also, for example, A equals A. The law of non-contradiction, A cannot be A and not A at the same time. As far as we know, these eternal truths, because that's what we're calling them, seem to be A, inviolate. What do you mean inviolate, Craig? Means they cannot be violated. And B, forever and always true. Now, as far as we know, that seems to be the case with these things called eternal truths. They imply, or it is reasonable to infer from the fact that these type of truths exist, that there is an intelligence behind them. And there's a little bit of a history, a little bit of a complicated explanation as to how we are to infer that. But the point of why it doesn't get us over the finish line is I use the word infer. He used the word proof. They don't prove that there was an intelligence that created them. They don't prove that there was a mind behind them. It's reasonable to infer, sure. But that's not a proof of God. So it gets you 70% of the finish line, but it doesn't quite prove anything. Now, they weren't even there. They were arguing the Aristotelian one, and the Aristotelian one isn't necessarily worth your time. So they spent about an hour and 15 minutes in a long, ponderous, whenever I'm watching something, okay, if I'm watching a video and I'm watching a debate and my mind starts wandering, my first instinct is to blame the thing I'm watching. Yeah, and my mind started to really wander when I was watching this. Wow, it's like having a lot of trouble focusing. So I'm like, what about this is not that compelling, or why isn't this grabbing my attention? Now, I could be wrong. These are certainly more accomplished scholars than I myself am, and they are both probably trained in PhDs in philosophy. So it's possible that they were having a really, really erudite, highbrow discussion that was, if not quite over my head. I could understand what they were saying, but maybe I don't understand the significance because I haven't been trained at the university level to understand that they were actually laying down the groundwork for the argument in a really important way. That's possible. I'll give you that. Sometimes when you are dealing with something highbrow, sometimes you need training to appreciate it properly. I'll give you an example I can think of where that's true. If you listen to classical music ever, no, I don't listen to classical music, Craig. I know you don't, but you should sometimes, just every once in a while, maybe. I know you don't. Don't tell me you do when you don't. You're listening to Ariana Grande. I know this. I don't have to play guessing games of what's on your Spotify playlist. It's not classical music, let's be perfectly honest. But if you were to listen to classical music, okay, you would find this to be the case. Something like Beethoven, Mozart, you can kind of appreciate without any education. There's enough of a ground, you have enough musical sense to be able to listen to Beethoven's Ninth and appreciate it just as a layman. That is not true of everything in the classical world. For example, there is Wagner. Wagner, you kind of need to be educated to appreciate. You can't just go in cold like you can with Ariana Grande. Put on Ariana Grande's song, 30 seconds in, you'll get it. Unless you're, musically totally musically inept, you'll get it immediately. But something like Wagner, you can't. You kind of have to have some sort of relatively in-depth training to even appreciate it. So it's possible they were having a conversation that was somewhat out of my league in terms of, I haven't been trained enough and I'm not actually well educated enough in philosophy to know that this was actually a really good discussion, and I I'm not sophisticated enough to understand what these highfalutin highbrows are saying. That's entirely possible. I found it ponderous and long-winded and beside the point, but more importantly, because what they are supposed to be arguing about is a proof of God, and I have read Feser's book, and there's only one proof in there that matters. And it's the fourth one, and that one doesn't get you over the finish line. So if we, the Christian community, are going to be clear-minded about this, and we have to be clear-minded about this if we're ultimately going to overcome in these arguments and win the day, if we are trying to prove something, and you got 4, 5 proofs, you throw out 4. If you're trying to ascertain whether something is in fact true, you need only have one successful proof, then you proved it. Bang. See how that works? Bang. Oh, proof. Yeah, proof. So you need only have one proof that is true. So you don't have to bother with the weakest ones. And if you're going to be clear-minded about it, you shouldn't waste your time on the ones that don't quite get you over the finish line. You should go with the strongest one and work from there. And the strongest one is the one I said. And that doesn't quite get you over the finish line. Doesn't prove anything, like I said. Gets you 70% of the way there. You can reasonably infer from the fact that there are eternal truths. It is reasonable to infer some type of mind-like quality or some type of divine... You can't say this. I'm not making a proof right now, so if you're an atheist, calm down. I'm just saying it's a reasonable inference, given the state of the world we live in and the fact that there are inviolate eternal truths. It is sufficient to say that it's a reasonable inference that some type of mind created those. It's not a proof, though, so calm down. I didn't just make an argument for God, and nothing to debunk here, nothing to see here. So, their debate was somewhat long-winded and somewhat ponderous, and not necessarily cutting to the heart of the matter. If we are to prove God, we need to go with the strongest possible arguments. Now, if you're an atheist and you're licking your chops going, Craig just admitted, that's my atheist imitation. You don't like it? Change the behavior of your community, because that's my imitation as it stands. Craig just admitted. That's my atheist imitation. Again, you don't like it? Change the behavior of your community, because that's how I perceive you guys. Cackling, rabid dogs. If you are an atheist, cackling to yourself, going, Craig just admitted there's no such thing as a proof of God. That's been pretty obvious. But, here's a big but, and here's the caveat, and the caveat should give you pause. I said that one of his proofs is 70% of the way there. 70% of the way there is good enough for now. Matter of fact, I could probably think of 5 atheists, no joke. 5 atheists. I didn't say Christians, I said 5 atheists who, if I gave them, here are the attributes of God according to classical theism, and I said, here are some of the proofs. Finish these so that they actually prove God. I can think of 5 people who could probably do it in the next 2 years. And that's from the atheist community. What does that mean, Craig? It means we're almost on the doorstep of proving God by logical proof, by philosophical inference. Promise. I promise we aren't that far away. Now that seems like a tall claim, but some of his arguments are 70% of the way there. This isn't like the greatest genius that ever walked the face of the earth. He's really not. If you go read the argument from eternal truth right now, you'll go, hey, wait a minute, some of this does make sense. And no, it doesn't quite prove that God exists, but it's reasonable to infer from the premises as stated, which gets you a lot of the way there. So the big difference between proving and inferring. Proving is harder to do, but a proof ultimately has to prove. It cannot be debated with. If someone can take issue, can raise a reasonable objection to one of your premises, then the whole argument fails. Give you a perfect case in point. Right now, as we speak, the best example, best case scenario, best framing of the Kalam cosmological argument I've ever seen in my life was put on Twitter in the last week by Miss Sarah Salviander, something like that. Really smarty boots Christian, honestly. Really, really top-notch, top-shelf, first-rate mind. She has blog posts that I read, and honestly, I really don't understand what she's talking about sometimes. I really don't. I'm like, that sounds interesting. Sounds interesting, Miss Salviander. What on earth is she talking about? No idea. No idea. Now, I'm not exactly Mr. Science guy, so It's not really all that relevant to me. But her framing of the Kalam cosmological argument is about as good as it gets. And it's really worth your time, really worth checking out. But even in her expert framing of the argument, she doesn't get you there. Just to deal with the first premise. The Kalam cosmological argument, the reason why I never use it falls apart in the first premise. Everything that exists has a cause. Okay. Says who? According to who? I assert it. Yeah, exactly. That's the point. That's an assertion. She doesn't solve that. She addresses the objection raised, the highbrow objection to that first premise is that, this is hard to explain. There are objects in physics that pop in and out of existence. Again, let's go to the quantum realm. Now, once you start dealing with the quantum realm, as I've tried to explain in some of my other videos, okay, once you start dealing with the quantum realm, all bets are off. Why? Because what seems logically true isn't necessarily logically true. There are aspects of the quantum realm, of quantum mechanics, quantum physics, that actually seems to defy Newtonian physics as was understood prior to quantum mechanics. The only reason that quantum mechanics is validated is because they proved them by experiment. They don't actually quite make sense, and nobody quite understands how it works. That seemed a little ponderous and gaseous right there, Greg. All right. Okay, so what do I actually mean? They're counterintuitive. And some aspects of quantum physics defy Newtonian physics, or seem to. And the physicists themselves don't quite understand how they work. And that's what she's operating off of. So she starts talking about there are particles in quantum mechanics that pop in and out of existence. Okay? And then she says, the objection is they pop in and out of existence. That means they can randomly occur. And if she says random, and she's correct about this, that's what I mean. This is a really smarty boots Christian. It's well worth your time to just look at her Kalam cosmological argument. Swear to God, this woman is first-rate mind. And if you're an atheist and you think she don't know what she's talking about, my guess is you don't. Honestly, if I had to guess between her and you, I'd guess her. You the dumbass out of the two. You're the pigeon. You're the pigeon, the proverbial pigeon in the chessboard. You the pigeon. You're the one knocking the pieces over. Go, God, she's so dumb. I beat her argument so easily. Yeah, okay. Why, you're pooping all over yourself. That's what I would guess. But anyways, so getting back to her objection to the objection. Yeah, it's long-winded. You can play it back slowly. Work with me. She makes an objection to the standard highbrow objection to the Kalam cosmological argument. That being, things can pop in and out of existence according to quantum mechanics, which means they can occur randomly. She says random doesn't mean uncaused. All of that is true. Did you hear what her objection to the objection is? Random does not mean uncaused. Okay, here's the problem. It also doesn't mean caused. See what I'm saying? If we are making a proof, we can't just say, this seems true. Everything that exists has a cause. Yeah, that seems true. That seems reasonable. But you have to tail end it with as far as we know. And if you're doing a proof, that isn't good enough. So she says random doesn't mean uncaused. That's fine. I accept that. It also doesn't mean caused. And when you're dealing with the quantum realm, all bets are off. What do you mean, Craig? I mean, I promise you right now, there is a physicist, a quantum mechanicist, a quantum physicist somewhere, somehow, who is trying to find an equation that will actually prove that things can pop in and out of existence for no particular rhyme or reason. I promise you someone's working on that equation right now. You see what I'm saying? Somebody right now is working on an equation in the quantum mechanics, in their little quantum mechanics closet, to prove that there are such things that can pop in and out of existence for no particular rhyme or reason, not just randomly, but uncaused. Therefore, the first premise of the Kalam cosmological argument has to be an assertion, and an assertion only. Everything that exists has a cause, as far as we know. But there's probably somebody working on an equation right now that can prove that false. Therefore, it can't be a proof of God. Or it can't be a proof of, it's not usually used as a proof of God, but whatever. So that's my point. Proofs mean prove. If you can take a reasonable objection to a premise, it didn't prove anything. Do you understand? If somebody can take a reasonable objection to a premise, You haven't proved anything. The premise has to be rock solid and airtight. 2 + 2 = 4. I object. Okay, then you don't know math. Okay, well, you're wrong. Well, you're mistaken. I object. 2 + 2 doesn't always equal 4. Yes, it does. Inviolate, rock solid, airtight, inviolate, forever and always true. That's how you build construct an argument wherein you have proved something like the existence of God. Again, don't get too happy. If you're an atheist, watch it back. Why? Because these arguments are getting close. The key innovation of the Kalam argument is that it is trying to deal with generic God, not specific God. Once that innovation was put into place, like I said, I can think of 5 atheists. 5 who aren't physicists, who aren't, necessarily PhDs in philosophy. Maybe one of them has. I don't know. Does Alex Malpass have a PhD in philosophy? Probably, yeah, he's super smart. He probably does. Probably does, and if he doesn't, he'll get one. He'll get one, whatever. He could probably come up with a logical proof that proves God according to the attributes of classical theism, probably within 3 years. Actually, he could. I bet you anything he could. It's not that hard. Why? Because we're almost there. That's the point. And when we're there, what? No more atheists. Atheists go the way of flat earthers. You don't have to accept that I'm right. Just an educated guess, but I think I'm right. And if I'm right, atheists go the way of flat earthers. Why? Because any reasonable, intelligent person will know that there is a proof of God's existence. But in the meantime, we shouldn't be wasting time on things that don't quite get us over the finish line. Why? Because it's what I just said, a waste of time. There's no point. There's no point. So, I was a little long-winded and rambling myself. I was a little ponderous and gaseous myself. That's fine. Sometimes I myself will, stretch out and expand on the subject. I think a lot of what I said is actually really valuable. I really do. I think there's insights to be gleaned from what I just laid down. That's why I laid it down. So, there you have it, kids. That is all for now. Take whatever I just said with a grain of salt. Again, if you're an atheist, you don't have to object to anything I just said. I didn't say that anybody proved God in anywhere. I didn't say Feser proved God. I didn't say Salviander proved God. The only thing I said is that Edward Feser's book, especially if you're a Christian, you should read because it's well argued and there's a lot of good stuff in there. And the 4th argument is close to the finish line of proving God. And Sarah Salviander's her little Twitter fest on the Kalam cosmological argument is possibly the most intelligent framing of the argument I've ever seen. I think so. I could be wrong about that, but I've never seen anything even close. It's the only thing that ever made me think it's a real argument, but her objection doesn't stand. Her solving of the objection doesn't solve the problem. That's what I tried to spell out in the video you just heard. So, there you have it, kids. That is all for now. Mass is ended. Go in peace. Amen.